Hey everyone, and welcome to the E3 Day 3 wrap-up, where we'll be going over all of the biggest reveals and the brand new announcements that we got on the third day of E3 2021. So if for some reason you actually missed today's presentations, don't worry about it. This is the best way to get wrapped up with all of the biggest reveals. Starting out, Microsoft put out a Halo multiplayer presentation, going over just about all of the details when it comes to the multiplayer free-to-play online experience for Halo Infinite. This is a game that they announced yesterday officially and is set to launch on holiday 2021. And in regards to the multiplayer experience, they basically confirmed that it will have season passes. They will obviously all will be free. You will have the opportunity to constantly have one active. So if for some reason you miss out on a previous reward or anything like that, you don't have to worry and try to rack up experience before the event actually ends and the new season begins. You'll actually have the option to pick up right where you left off at any other previous season and basically swap in between seasons to choose when you want to get the rewards you're actually after, which is an interesting idea. When it comes to the weapon mechanics and map balancing and stuff like that, they went over all of the details when they're basically stating that the team has been meticulously working over these maps and the weapon balancing for quite a while now, and this is something that is obviously going to be a work in progress. They openly speak about how you're going to be able to just have a lot of feedback on what they're going to be doing going forward. This is a game that they're going to be providing a lot of support for going forward, not just year one, but multiple years into the future. So they definitely want players to remain active and keep coming back and giving them feedback, even if they're new or returning players from other Halo games. They were also very open about the fact that they took a lot of the feedback to heart when it came to the original reveal for the visuals of the game and how a lot of criticism was aimed towards that, and they were basically honest and said that they were willing to work on it as best as they could, but also that they wanted to ship it this holiday season. So alongside with the multiplayer experience, you will be able to take on, obviously the full campaign will be paid for. So while you do get the online for free, the campaign will have a cost attached to it, as you would have typically expect. But shifting over now to the E3 Indie Showcase, they showed off quite a bit of a lot of indie games that I believe, for at the very least, we had seen in several other places already. Right Away Lancerlots was one of the first ones that stood out the most. This is an arena-based multiplayer with multiple characters where they each have their own skills. They are definitely trying to go after that Overwatch audience with their very own interesting look. But ultimately, this is just an indie project, so you do have to keep that in mind. But it was one of the more standout games that they had in this E3 Indie Showcase. Another interesting game that they showed off is called Life Slide. This is a Steam indie game that's set to release on August 6th. You're basically flying a kite or a paper plane through open environments and open areas, which is definitely one of those indies ideas that you would typically be able to see. But other than that, visually it was a little bit striking, but it wasn't necessarily anything tied to a story or anything along those lines. Another visual standout was Fallen Aces. This is a first-person melee game where you are a mob gangster type of player and you're basically attacking and kind of just taking care of thugs in the street. Very first person, you are just straight up just punching people to death and just a lot of blood and gore everywhere. It was definitely visually a standout, one of those very few standout games that they had in that interesting indies presentation. Another one was Moolander. This is an action platformer set to release on all current gen consoles, where you are a cow in space. As you would have typically expected by the name, you are simply just trying to platform one way to another and try to protect your milk. That's the entire purpose of the game. It seems to be like aliens are trying to take it, and you are always trying to be one step ahead from them being able to obtain it. The last game that I'll mention from the E3 Indie Showcase was the Neko Ghost Jump. This is an action platformer where you're shifting from 2D to a 3D perspective based off of where your character is actually looking. So you have a typical 2D side-scrolling platformer, and then whenever you shift perspectives into 3D, it actually opens up into what you would typically expect from a Mario 64 type of game. This is coming to all current gen consoles, Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, PC, all of that. And it looks very interesting. I had seen this game previously announced for the Nintendo Switch, so I had seen it in the past, and it's interesting that they decided to show it off in the showcase. Another showcase that they actually held is called Freedom Games E3 Showcase. This is where we actually got a first look at Dreamscaper. This is a time loop game that's set to release on August 12th for Nintendo Switch and Steam. And I made sure to pull up the trailer for this one because it's a looker. It's definitely one of those isometric third-person games where you're just fighting a wave of enemies, but there's flare effects, there's just particle effects everywhere. It definitely looks very flashy combat-wise, a lot of screen shake whenever you're able to connect with an enemy and stuff like that. So it looks very interesting visually, while the combat is typically stuff that we've already seen in multiple games already. We also got a first look at Airborne Kingdom. This is a game that is releasing on all consoles where you're basically making ships that fly that are also cities. So you have these big mega structures floating around in the air that you are constantly building upon, but they're not actually set on the ground. They're still flying, they're still floating in the air, and you're building out from within. So I'm not necessarily sure how you would be able to get materials to grow them out, but essentially you are making a big mega city that's also floating in the sky at the same time. One of the games that's also going to catch a lot of eyes specifically from this presentation alone, although it was already announced a couple of months back, is Coromon. This is a monster taming game that is just like a certain Nintendo game you probably grew up playing. This is coming to Switch and Steam next year, and it's pretty much exactly what you would expect. It has some puzzle elements, it has obviously the combat transitions that you would typically expect from an isometric point of view to just like a third-person perspective, over your shoulder combat style, everything you would typically expect. It has monster evolutions, it has monster taming, they learn new abilities, they get stronger, all of that. There's a game that released last year called Nexomon Extinction that is like a much more visually appealing game, but it did very much that same monster taming thing that Pokemon is well known for. And this is more of a pixel art 2D like, where you are just exactly doing that same thing that you did in those red and blue days. The last indie game that I'll mention is Slaughter League. This is a steamer-friendly game that challenges you basically every time you die. So you die over and over again and you're constantly being challenged, and it's relentless in its pursuit when it comes to that. And when it comes to conferences, that was just pretty much everything all that we had today. Capcom of course held their Capcom E3 presentation as well, where they showcased a lot of gameplay for the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. This is a remake for the old Japanese games that released that were like spin-offs of the Ace Attorney series, where you're like a lawyer, one from England and another one from like ancient Japan. So they showcased a little bit more of those games, but the ones that they really focused on was actually the DLC for Resident Evil Village that is set to release very soon. And this one is just really interesting what they're trying to do with that game. I do feel like Resident Evil Village is going to get a lot of that same wacky DLC that Resident Evil 7 got, where Resident Evil 7 got so much weird DLC as the game was already finished, and they basically moved on to just bigger and better things and try experimental ideas. Also in the Capcom presentation, you got to see more of Monster Hunter Stories 2 and Monster Hunter Rise, but I will be making a separate video going those games over because I cover Monster Hunter separately in my channel, so I will be talking about those in a separate video. But for now, they were just trailers for stuff that we already knew was coming. But that's it for E3 2021 Day 3. Today was a bummer, a big downer for sure. Not even close to what we got yesterday with the Microsoft and even the weird-ass Square Enix presentation that we got. But other than that, we do have tomorrow to look forward to, the Nintendo Direct, the Treehouse presentation, and of course, Bandai Namco is also having their own thing. And there will be awards as well or something like that. But that's going to be it for this video. Hopefully you guys found it interesting and educational, because again, it wasn't necessarily a day worth sticking around to watch all those streams because they weren't necessarily all that worth it. If you're brand new to my channel, please sure to leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up. And as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.